I love Darkest Dungeon 1. The Lovecraftian narrative, the ambience, the voice acting, the random number generator decided to fuck me that day. It was awesome. So awesome that I went on to make my very first game review ever on that game. So when I heard that they were making a second one, in my eyes, it was basically the release of Half-Life 3. I was ecstatic, dude. Fuck yeah, I can't wait for the voice actor to kill himself again, and you bet I treated that shit like fine wine, dude. It went right onto the wish list from the moment it popped up on Steam. And I gave it all the time in the world for all the balancing, the updates, the DLCs, and the 20 nerfs that will inevitably happen to A-Bomb. We'll get into that later. I gave it the time, man. I wanted to enjoy every bit of it all at once. I wanted to be there at the end of all the updates with a fully featured product on my hands and the opportunity to savor every bit of it. And now I introduce to you my most recent mental breakdown. Look, whenever I make a video on a game, it's always about a game that I'm generally positive about. In a nutshell, I'm a corporate shill and greed is my middle name. And I want you to know I walked into this game with full, unfiltered cognitive bias right away, right? Like I was in a trance. Like I said earlier, this game was Half-Life 3 to me. So the moment I booted it up, I was already sucking the proverbial dick of Red Hook Studios. I had a positive review before I even booted up the game. And on the Patreon, I had already made an unpublished top 5 reasons on why you should play Darkest Dungeon 2. And then I played it for about 2 hours and found out that they went from a roguelike to a roguelite. That is to say that they took everything that everyone loved and completely got rid of it. They got rid of it. They removed everything. They got rid of it all. They got rid of everything. They fucked up the game. I should clarify from now that despite being called Darkest Dungeon 2, this game is anything but a sequel. For it to be a sequel, that insinuates that there's going to be major connections with the first game. Darkest Dungeon 2 takes place in a canonically different dimension where the developers tried to experiment with very different design choices, such as, what if Vestal was shit? So they have to be nearly dead to heal. Cool. Bleed Guy is now Blight Guy. 2D becomes 3D. It's actually pretty good. What if roguelite mechanics, but unlocking items is completely random, so at a certain point it becomes a bad idea to keep unlocking as that would dilute the pool of items that you can get. Information in general is now heavily obscure or just outright missing from the game and the Wikipedia. Affects no choices, but what does that mean though? What if the story was told backwards and in pieces so nothing made sense at all until the very end, where it will still make no sense, but if you think about it, it will. In the first game, the entire hamlet was managed by various villagers trying to make ends meet. In Darkest Dungeon 2, the entire place doesn't even physically exist, it only manifests metaphysically. Is he trying to call me gay? Also, sex is no longer a mod. It's now canon, and homosexuality is a valid DPS strategy. While ultimately, I don't think it's a bad game, I did put in over 100 hours and beat both game modes, I can't help but criticize it, because Darkest Dungeon 1 was amongst my favorite turn-based games ever, and to see the sequel be such a far and long departure of the first one has me playing that cuckoo-ass monkey game on both monitors just to put up with it. The game is mislabeled. It's not Darkest Dungeon 2. It has little to do with Darkest Dungeon 1 to even be a sequel. And this sentiment is also reflected in the reviews. The advertising would make you think that it's related in some way, but it canonically doesn't even take place in the same dimension. In all honesty though, I have to admit a personal failure. While writing this video, I was extremely conflicted, because on one hand, the game on its own is not a bad game. It's not great, but it's alright. It's got some replay value for sure. But on the other hand, its labeling would indicate that it has a connection with another game, that game being Darkest Dungeon 1. So I went into this game with the expectation of major similarities with the first one, which wasn't even remotely correct. In fact, I would go as far as to say that they degraded in some sections, such as the entire game heavily revolving around the usage of tokens and controlling them, but we'll get into that later. This internal conflict caused me to be quite critical of the game in everything that I wrote about it. Whenever I had something nice to say, it would be followed up with 2 other negative things to say. So, in order to have this video be objectively remotely coherent, it's gonna be in 2 parts. Part 1 is an informational, professional review of the game and its mechanics, how it functions, and so on. Part 2 is gonna be a first for the channel. It's gonna be an essay. A video essay. Pure hatred! A collection of critiques regarding the various parts of the game and its mechanics, ending it with a mental breakdown that's canonically accurate with the game itself, as I abandon all professionality and allow unfiltered rage to fly free. like a butterfly.
Whoa, damn, bro! Fire! Fire rating! Amazing!
Bro's got a severe case of annoying ass syndrome. That's interesting. Get a heal in real quick. 0? What, he liked it? Brother's new mental illness meta just dropped. Now how the fuck is this a thing? Damn, a disease? Damn, another disease. I just cured it! What? As it would turn out, I was getting so many diseases because of this quirk, and the game only hints towards it. What the fuck?
$25. I paid $25 for this shit. They made me pay $25. $25. I paid $25.
Darkest Dungeon 2 is a turn-based roguelite that's meant to be difficult until you look things up on Wikipedia. See, the game is even more of an information battle than the first one, as some information is just outright not explained and the more difficult fights involve mechanics that are heavily obscured. The tutorials are pretty bad, coming in the form of text walls that you can read in the menu, and sometimes they are incomplete, leaving out some pretty valuable pieces of information. For example, one important mechanic I discovered after beating the game is that the higher the stress on your heroes, the less likely they are to get positive relationship points with the others. This is a pretty important piece of information, and it's never explained in the game. I think you're meant to just guess that it exists, and I didn't. There's quite a few examples of this. So, things will look difficult until you figure out the mechanics involved, unlock the right abilities, or give in to the fact that the developers have a bias towards certain characters and abilities. But we'll get into that later. There's 2 game modes, Confessions being the primary game mode, with Kingdoms being more of an arcade. For the time being, I'll be focusing on Confessions, as it is the primary game mode and the way it was intended to be played. Confessions is a campaign of 5 missions, each mission containing a trip through 3 regions and ending with the mountain where the main boss of the campaign mission is located. However, to enter the mountain, you're gonna need a boss trophy, which is obtained by killing bosses in their lairs. Each region has 1 boss and you only need 1, so you can choose when to do it. Fun fact, mini-bosses are usually harder than bosses in this game. The reason for that is because bosses are primarily mechanical in their difficulty, so once you understand what's happening, it's usually pretty easy to proceed, whereas mini-bosses said fuck that and instead use their multiple turns per round to do high damage to your entire party. Watch as the entire team gets shit on in a single turn with a mini-boss, whereas a boss may very well just play a game of Stardew Valley, replying to your violence and abuse with a bucket of compost and then planting 2 Raynar seeds from RuneScape. Any good game of strategy has some degree of farming in it, planting the seeds for the future. But I have to admit, in a game about battling Lovecraftian nightmares, I would have never expected violence to be replied to with a diet consisting of nothing but uncooked broccoli. It seems pretty effective too, as the entire team gets so desperate for an unhealthy meal that they turn onto each other. Speaking of Lovecraft, this game is more about the love than the craft, as the narrator actively encourages you to push on. However, the game's storytelling is backwards, starting from the very beginning before telling you what predicament you're in. So it's gonna be a pretty long time before anything starts to make any sense at all.
Heralded a new, pernicious phase of our investigation.
Cool! So when does any of that start making any fucking sense? Which is unfortunate, because now that I've fully understood the story, I think it's actually pretty good. Just that it was told in a bad way. Let me give you an example. I had a cat once, and it lived its entire life in pure passion, containing nothing but love for all the people around her, even to the people that she didn't know. Then one day, with seemingly no reason, she started crossing from our balcony to the neighbors, where it would then pick a fight with the most elderly person in there consistently. Now imagine if what I just told you was somehow connected to Darkest Dungeon 2's story. You'd think to yourself, wow, that example makes no sense and is seemingly completely disconnected with the environment and everything happening in it. And you'd be quite right. That's exactly how the game tells its story. So you're likely to play the game, not understand much about the story, then go watch a video that explains it all, and then think to yourself, damn, my man is not only fucked up in his imagination, but his definition of basic geometry as well. The gameplay revolves around you making your team and then going off riding through the 3 regions that you choose, and along the way you choose your route as it comes and try your best to make the most of what the game gives you. Your ride is some knockoff AliExpress edition of the Maserati. They unironically get you to play the Subway Surfer ass minigame. As you go from location to another and choose your route, you'll have to interact with the various points points of interest in this game. Sometimes it'll be an organized group of enemies, sometimes it's some terrible road engineering, sometimes it'll be a group of people asking for help or offering to help. To each of these, your team of heroes will react differently. For example, one hero might offer to trade relics for other items. One hero might spend time helping them out for pay, while another will just say, "Hey, that's some nice stacks of cash you got there. It's so unfortunate that my gun happens to misfire 13 times into your body and that your money was simply completely surrounded in glue. So I couldn't give it back and had to leave with it. Man, that's so unfortunate. What an unlikely set of circumstances. Wish I could do anything about it though." Depending on your choices, but mostly your luck, your team will have either a positive or negative relationship with each other. Though every choice will tell you how it affects the team. Every time it has a positive effect, you get 1 relationship point, and every time it's negative, you lose 2 relationship points. So it's biased towards being negative, and the more negative a relationship is, the more likely it is to stay negative. You'll get some situations where the highwayman, you know, the guy whose career is to literally steal, will outright despise the other member of the team that you keep choosing over him to steal from people. And if no choice was involved, then the subject is gonna be a lot more ethnically concerned, because while driving, there's a random chance for your heroes to banter with each other, saying shit like, "Damn bro, you look more flamboyant than usual." At which point, the reply is gonna be something along the lines of either, "Thanks man, appreciate you," or 192.168.35.33. Every relationship starts neutral at 10 out of 20 points, with 0 being an extremely high chance of a negative relationship and 20 out of 20 being an extremely high chance of a positive relationship. If this sounds intuitive, well, as is with a lot of things in this game, it's intuitive with a catch, as every point doesn't matter until you reach certain thresholds in relationship points. The game, of course, never relays this information. I had to find it on the wiki. Another piece of hidden information is that the stress level of every hero affects the chances of their banter being positive, with higher stress reducing the chance of positive banter. I found out about this by reading 2-year-old patch notes. At the end of every region, you will reach an inn. They act as a checkpoint of sorts. It comes with a shop where you can buy various items, like combat items, which are consumables that you can use as a free action in a fight. There's also inn items, which is a broad term for a bunch of items that you can use to get a buff that will last for the whole region usually. For example, food increases your maximum health, which in turn means that you will heal more, as healing is percentage based. Right after exiting any inn, the game will roll the chances for a relationship. When a positive relationship forms, a random ability will be chosen from both heroes to have a positive effect. The negative relationships, though, are much more severe in their effects, doing shit like making the game unplayable every time the dedicated healer does less healing than the poison gas expert. This happens too many times. On top of this, a negative relationship will force you to have the negative ability selected at all times. You can only select 5 abilities, so if a commonly used ability is selected, well, I'm fucking dead! The relationship system feels like a slippery slope for the most part. You can of course prevent this slippery slope from taking place by buying several liters of alcohol and forcing your unpaid employees to chug it down. Nothing makes friends better than turning their body from 70% water to a 70% chance for a car accident. But this is only possible if 2 things take place. Number 1, you gambled hard enough to get it from the gacha machine, and number 2, it shows up in the shops and you happen to have the cash for it, which, much like the gambling phenomena that I keep experiencing with this game, it's there when I don't want it and never there when I do want it. And if it's ever there when I do want it, it's in the form of 1 relationship point for 8 gold, which can only be defined as a really good inside joke implemented into the game by the developers. Every hero starts out with 5 abilities, with 6 other unlockable abilities. You can unlock abilities by exploring the story of each hero, which you do at a location called the Shrine of Reflection. You find it randomly on a run. Every unlock is permanent and is shared across all runs. The game functions off of a currency called Hope. You get some with every run. Before you start any run, you will visit a spot called the Altar of Hope. This is where you spend hope for various upgrades or unlockables, such as bigger inventory, higher durability on the Maserati, new heroes, subclasses, and cosmetics. I have more to say about the progression system, but for it to make sense, you have to understand the combat itself and the design around it. The combat is very similar to its predecessor on a surface level. It's still turn-based, and you're managing not just the health, but also the stress of every hero. If health hits 0, the hero enters death's door, where every hit has a chance to kill off the hero for good. If stress maxes out, your character experiences a mental breakdown, putting their health to 5% and losing a lot of relationship points with everyone else. Where the game functions very differently is in 2 ways. First of all, stunning has been almost completely removed, and stalling as a strategy has been overkilled in this game, largely due to the strict rules around healing in general. You can heal health passively as you travel around the map, but you can't heal stress passively. You have to manually heal that with abilities in the middle of a fight. This change might not sound like much, but if you understand how the first game functioned, you'll know that one of the most dominant mid-combat strategies was to stall. You would often bring a team that's capable of doing that, with some members on the team having the dedicated role to stun and crowd control. But since crowd control as a role doesn't exist anymore, most fights end up boiling down to a DPS race, and the ideal team composition just looks something like this. And the items you unlock via the gambling machine at the Altar of Hope, they don't do much for you. I mean, just look at these stats. Why are they like this? Why is it 1%? What is that ever gonna do for you? For the most part, the valuable items will be anything that either removes negative quirks or gives relationship points. Outside of that is just food items for more health and combat items for damage or debuffs. The backline of the enemy is usually the most dangerous. If not clearly dangerous right away, then eventually dangerous when you find out that they have a retrieve IP address ability.
What? Hey, hell no, what the fuck? That shit just got me queasy. I don't recall seeing this one in the difficulty settings.
Now, for the second way that the combat heavily differs from the combat of the first game, well, that would be due to the token system, and this is where I really have to hold my tongue on the game. Before I continue, let me familiarize you with a certain concept I like to call the layers of progression in a game. Progressing in any game happens in 2 layers. The internal layer, which is progressing inside the game, usually in the form of getting better gear, higher stats, unlock better items, more of them, and so on. Basically, direct increases in numbers. And then there's the external layer, which is the player understanding the game, how it functions, and most effective tactics. While you can unlock quite a lot of items at the Altar of Hope, and some of those items can be quite powerful, most of the progression takes place through you in the external layer, as the game can heavily obscure some of the key information to beating it. So while you can unlock subclasses, items, and improve your abilities, and all of that will definitely help, the key to this madness lies straight through googling the individual bosses to understand how they work. This is especially true for the Obsession campaign boss fight, which is a fight that ends almost as quickly as it starts. I'm not gonna spoil much during part 1 of the video, but this is a fight that obscures what's happening so much so that I don't know anyone who didn't just look up the boss. So you can have several runs that reach the boss but lose all of them because you don't understand what's happening, and start the next run just as clueless as the first run. Now, how does any of what I just said tie into the token system? See, the game is generally less reliant on chance than the first game. Sure, there's the obscured behavioral mechanics of some of the enemies, but generally speaking, everything's much more certain. Except for the terminology. And I'm so close. I'm so close to losing it. I'm so close. At any moment. Bear with me here, because this part is not easy to explain. We all know what a buff and debuff is. A buff is a boost to stats, and a debuff is the opposite of that. Pretty simple. You probably already know this if you played any RPG ever. Very standard terms. Darkest Dungeon 2 saw this and decided to reinvent the wheel. The design is very human. Check this stupid ass shit out! For whatever reason, the term buffs and debuffs got renamed several times in the same game. Instead of buffs and debuffs, you got tokens. Positive and negative tokens. Combo tokens. Vanguard buffs and debuffs. Not to be mixed up with buffs and debuffs, or in buffs and in debuffs, consecrations and orange tokens. The game's more difficult battles revolve around controlling tokens, so this is a system that you'll be interacting with quite a lot if you're looking to win. There's an in-game list of every token in the game, but not only is it missing a lot, but it doesn't explain itself on some things either. For example, it took me around 70 hours to find out what the worship token does. The thing is, on its own, it doesn't do anything. It's a mechanical token. It can only be used in special conditions, such as the presence of a mini-boss or special types of enemies. What's confusing though is the conditions are never clarified in-game, and if the conditions are never met, they still generate the token. They just don't use it, and you're left asking the question about what I do. Anyway, buffs and debuffs still exist, except that they exist in 2 separate UIs. You know, I'm starting to think, with how separated the UIs are, they really should have called this game Segregation Dungeon 2. Tokens are a one-time use buff. For example, a strength token causes the next hit the character does to do 50% more damage, and once it gets used up, it's gone. Positive tokens are yellow, while negative tokens are blue. This distinction is important because there's two abilities in the entire game that interact with them separately. Very quickly though, you'll find one of those abilities becoming the center of everything you do. The rest is basically buffs but with mechanics. Orange tokens usually allow the enemy to use special abilities or receive unique buffs. I have a lot more to say about this, but I decided that getting detailed about the token system is pointless. I also realized, after deleting this script 12 times in a row, that if I get into it, we're never gonna see the light of day again. So instead, I'm gonna do that in part 2. You can think of it as buffs and debuffs, but they can be turned to other things depending on whatever's going on at the time. We live in the Disney Channel! I have to point out a certain problem with the game. There's this overarching narrative that you're learning by failing and that you'll eventually learn enough to overcome the final bosses. This wouldn't be a problem had failure sometimes meant losing 3 hours of a single run, and all you have to show for it is some vivid understanding of a poorly communicated mechanic, and that's assuming it's communicated at all.
I'm next. Yeah, I would fucking hope so. What is he gonna do otherwise? Bust into a rhythm and rhyme and shit gas? Go.
Learning by failure is best executed when the game respects your time in the process. For example, in Elden Ring, there's a bonfire relatively close to every boss, so you don't waste much time before getting right back into fighting the boss after a failed run. Whereas in Darkest Dungeon 2, you have to spend an entire run to reach the final boss, who are all heavily mechanical and they don't always communicate what they do effectively. So you will usually fail your first run against them, which is frustrating because that means you have to spend another 3 hours to get there, and in those 3 hours, there isn't anything new, it's just all more of the same things again. Not to mention, the game constantly takes this slow approach, letting every cutscene or camera pan take its sweet ass time. Even the buttons can't be clicked until a full 3 seconds pass. It's a game about learning by failure, but it does a lot to make it clear that it doesn't respect your time.
Alright. We took 3 hours, but we're at the final boss. Let's see what he's got over here. Oh, cool. He only does 72 critical damage every hit, and the only way I can counter this was in the previous phase. The time where I didn't know that this would happen. That's cool. That's great. That's amazing game design. I really hope these guys go on to make more games.
While the game is procedurally generated, until you unlock a lot of items, the experience is gonna feel very repetitive very quickly because there won't be many differences between every run. So that's the gameplay loop of the Confessions game mode. You start a run, make your team, traverse the map, choosing which locations you want to check and what trouble you want to run into. You try your best to get the team to like each other and equip them with the best trinkets you can get your hands on to prepare them for the harder challenges of the game, which is usually a boss lair or the many stresses of a campaign boss. Whether you win or lose, you'll go back to the start and pass by the Altar of Hope. In this location, you spend a currency called Hope that you get by playing the game to receive various permanent buffs or unlock new items, heroes, or subclasses. As for the Kingdoms game mode, well, it's got its own group of obscure mechanics, but you can think of it as more of an arcade. Instead of a campaign mission, the story takes more of a backseat. You're meant to protect the various inns around the map from enemy sieges that happen occasionally. If you lose too many inns or run out of time, you will lose. To win, you have to progress the quest enough and eventually confront the leader of the Beast faction. As you go around, you can upgrade the various inns around the game with some restrictions. You can also control every character in the game individually, so you can have them defend against the sieges when you want to go somewhere else to do a quest or something. Though if they're not in your party, then they can't go on their own missions. Only fend off the sieges that you don't want to deal with yourself. You get one of every hero in the game, so you can form little defense parties that you move around the map. The game mode has its own share of hidden mechanics as well. For example, there's text saying underground network available, but I never figured out what it means or if it even means anything. That's about it. There's a fatigue mechanic that's meant to discourage you from using the same heroes over and over in your party, but the stores suck so much ass and have so little to offer even when upgraded that I just kept paying to heal their fatigue every time instead, as the trinkets you find on the road are usually far more valuable than whatever the store has to offer. I would go into more detail, but in all honesty, I'm so sick of obscure mechanics. Just the other day, I found out that you can actually skip a day in the game and choose to do nothing to let your heroes recover from their fatigue. I had to find out about this from Red Hook's official YouTube channel community posts, but by the time I had found out about it, I had already finished playing through the game mode. Overall though, everything happens much quicker in the Kingdoms game mode. Every region is much shorter and every currency reward is vastly reduced. This is likely because the amount of fights you'll be going through is going to be a lot more than you usually would go through in the Confessions game mode. That's it. That's all I have to say about the game, as far as a calm review goes. If you wanted a review, that was the review. From here on, I'm doing this for me. Not for my own well-being or anything healthy like that, but because I rolled a d20 on a willpower resistance check and landed a nat 1. Not because of bad luck, but because I paid $25 for a game not just this shallow, but also so different from what it portrays itself to be. You've heard me explain the game. Now you're gonna hear what I hate about it, of which there is quite a lot. While the combat felt initially improved from the first game, all the cool parts of the combat from the first game have been removed. No more stunning, no more disrupting enemy rank, it's just a DPS race through and through. Even the corpse mechanic on the enemies was watered down. Whether you kill an enemy using damage over time or a critical attack no longer matters. Enemy corpses now always spawn to ensure a consistent degree of bullshit present at all times. For a roguelite game, this one is a marathon. The longest roguelite run I ever had in any other game was about 1 hour and 40 minutes in Slay the Spire. In Darkest Dungeon 2, you're looking at an average of 3 hours per run. Every character starts out with 5 abilities and 6 other unlockable ones. Other than the fact that you don't get to see what abilities are locked or even the order you'll be unlocking them in, the fact that it takes 36 hours to unlock all abilities gives us reason to believe that the developers took inspiration from systems involving forced labor. Roguelites are usually made to have high replayability. 36 hours is a high amount of repetition for a game that has little variety to offer. We're talking less than 7 different enemies per region. Each character having a subclass initially sounds like a cool idea. Unfortunately, you don't get to know what they do until you unlock them. There's a short descriptor, but it doesn't mean anything because sometimes it can be completely wrong. Not to mention, some subclasses are just there as noob bait, like the Carcass subclass for the Helion, where 2 rounds in, she will do, and I shit you not, 0 damage consistently. There's no mechanic at play or anything here. You get some damage reduction, but that's it. The relationship system sounds cool initially until you realize that you'll be spending every playthrough trying to avoid as many punishments. It's so heavily biased towards giving you negative relationships, and the only way to deal with it consistently is by using the items you get from the inn, and that's assuming you already have them unlocked, which will set you back 20 hours of gameplay. Information in general is so heavily obscured now or outright missing from the game, with bosses being the biggest and worst culprit of the matter. In the first game, you were able to retreat to save what you have and recover from the blows of interacting with bosses for the first time. In the second game, that's no longer the case. You're in it to win or lose. This wouldn't be so bad had it had not have taken 3 hours per playthrough to win. The concept, the design, the idea, the entirety of the memory system. I could explain more, but you know what? Brothers, fellas, my goobas! Bowser can't keep this one in anymore! An infinitely replayable roguelite featuring the hottest new drop in the motorized vehicle industry. This shit is so slow that it takes 1/3 of the playtime you spend in this game. That's right. For every 3-hour run, an entire hour is just you watching the Maserati drive around at a snail's pace. An infinitely replayable roguelite featuring the worst meta progression in the entire roguelite genre. We're talking meta progression that makes you ask questions like, should I or should I not feed slime mold to my soldier so that he can enjoy the perks of 10% more health, which is, and I shit you not, about 2 to 5 more HP. Should I or should I not spend 12 gold on an item that has a 5% chance of making any difference for 1 turn? Should I or should I not? Unlock subclasses that are usually worse than the starter subclasses, and sometimes are just joke subclasses outright, sometimes making the hero do literally nothing after 3 rounds in the fight. Should I or should I not cry when the game turns out to have locked a critical, important ability that makes the entirety of the cultist viable as the last ability you unlock? So everything you've been unlocking till the end is not gonna be usable until you unlock the last ability. I found out about this after 50 hours of playtime. Again, no information in the game about this. Should I or should I not? keep investing into the gacha machine in hopes to unlock the better items, knowing that that would reduce the chance of me getting the good items I currently have unlocked already. What's most frustrating about this game is how close it is to being good. Don't get me wrong, no version of this game could have ever been better than the first one, but it's so close to being a good game on its own, but too many shortcuts are taken everywhere, at every layer, at every part in the game. Something is missing, an idea not fully actualized, a mechanic too obscure to be understandable, information that is just false at times. In the gameplay, the list of tokens is there but unfinished. In the loot, you get 10 versions of the same trinket and there's no loot protection either, so if you had just thrown away an item, you can absolutely get it back again. Even in the UI, you have over 7 different shapes for buttons in the entire game. Even in the tutorial, featuring UI and buttons that aren't even there anymore. Even in the subclasses, with some that seem like they're just meant to be bad on purpose. Even in the DLCs, we'll open that can of worms way later in the video. And worse yet, they're selling this phone game for $40. 40 USD! I downloaded malware and it was more fun than this shit.
Now that's crazy. But you know what's really crazy? Calling this game Darkest Dungeon 2, advertising it as a roguelike, charging people 40 doubloons to then find out it's a roguelite, and there isn't even a single dungeon. Wow! 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 Wow!
A sequel usually takes what the first game did and tries to refine the formula. Some things might change, but for the most part the games are usually similar. Take Dishonored 1 and 2 for example. Very similar games, with the second making minor changes, but overall simply just giving more of what the first game already offered. Darkest Dungeon 1 was a game about taking risks, about understanding the threat and adapting to it, about caring for each and every hero you use, upgrading their gear, their skills, and taking care of them mentally too, kissing them goodnight and reading them a bedtime story. You'd use the loot and various currencies you get from each and every run to upgrade the facilities around town, unlocking more advanced upgrades for cheaper or just to get scammed at the local trinket merchant. All of the time in between the gameplay, investing into the facilities to care for the heroes better, created this special feeling with every one of them, which made the times where things got spicy very intense.
Divine intervention, sunshine and rainbows. This fight is in the bag. What is he gonna do about it, Pip? That's a good one.
Every run was a build to the next one, leveling the heroes and eventually equipping them with better trinkets. The game was more than just the combat. It was about the care, about the preparation, about slowly building up the hamlet and the heroes involved. Then eventually, when you have the confidence and the trinkets to back it up, you could finally take your first steps into the Darkest Dungeon itself. Darkest Dungeon 2 looked at what the first one did, said fuck that, and changed everything including the category of the game. The combat has been reduced in its complexity, but made more obscure with the term buffs and debuffs getting renamed several times in the same game. The narrative is told backwards, in pieces, and makes no sense at face value.
Holy fuck. It was a Disney ritual. They brought back Walt Disney and he trademarked everyone that was present at the ritual. Probably. Possibly, maybe, I don't know. I'm more than halfway through the game and I don't know what's happening at this point.
The environment is seemingly random and has nothing to do with the story. This is because the game doesn't tell you what predicament you're in until the very end of the game. So there's practically no storytelling until you're near the end of the story. There isn't a mystery to put together either. It just tells you stuff that you have no context on. Death isn't permanent anymore. It's only permanent for that one run. So if a hero dies, that means you can't use that hero anymore and have to replace him at the next checkpoint. Not to mention, before every checkpoint, there's a particularly difficult battle in place, so recovering a run where a hero dies early is quite the struggle, and if you succeed, you don't get any rewards for it. And due to the lack of hero diversity, most of the time a death will usually mean that you're not gonna beat the final boss due to mechanical restrictions. And the entirety of the hamlet has been canonically replaced with reverse dementia, as well as information being heavily obscured, with some mental quirks just outright lacking description, both in-game and in the Wikipedia. It just says that it affects stuff, probably, and the stagecoach items say some stupid shit like has a chance to produce some items, and the chance is actually 3% or something along those lines, but it doesn't tell you to make it seem like it matters. There's also this symbol. I have 160 hours in the game. I don't know what this symbol means, but it shows up a lot. Not to mention, the game calls itself a sequel. It gives you many reasons to think that it'll be similar to the first one, only to shock you by showing you that it has nothing to do with the first game except the voice actor and the art style. Darkest Dungeon 2 has a bigger focus on single session experiences. Things only matter for that one run, and afterwards, nothing matters. You get that hope currency that you can spend on the Altar of Hope to unlock other neglected characters like the Leper. And in between all the action, driving the stagecoach feels more like a minigame than anything else. It's almost like an interactive loading screen. I saw a comment the other day that put it better than I could, so I'm gonna quote it. The cinematic, slow-paced style that the game takes doesn't mesh perfectly with the idea of an endlessly replayable roguelite. It makes the learn by dying aspect of the game's difficulty feel even more punishing and the grind feel even that much grindier. I'll be honest, this game had its own charm and kept me going for about 20 hours, and then I started to feel like things were getting very repetitive. A Shrine of Reflection here and there might unlock a cool new ability, but in most cases it didn't. The roguelite genre is at its best when it's wacky, and this game was shallow. A lot of the loot didn't feel like it mattered. Not to mention, the average roguelite playthrough is about 30 minutes. Darkest Dungeon 2 is a fucking marathon. It's like 3 hours on average. Now, Darkest Dungeon 2 is not a bad game, but imagine if the people behind Dishonored 1 released the sequel, Dishonored 2, and you boot up the game to find out that a single playthrough is about 2 hours of gameplay and that the ideal DPS composition involves homosexual tendencies. Now, does that sound like a bad game? No. It had its charm, it was nice to see, and kept me going for a little bit. But does that sound like what you came here for? No. No, it's not. Well, except the homosexual tendencies part. I mean, have you seen the Steam Workshop of the first game? You know, I didn't come here for it, but similar to how you didn't play Ultra Kill for the butt plug integration, maybe they just know what the people want, you know what I mean? I didn't come to Darkest Dungeon 2 to drive a goddamn Maserati. I came to inch forward through a claustrophobic hallway, step by step, tile by tile, not one moment without a bit of tenseness in the air, emphasized by that tiny soundtrack playing in the background. Every fight, its own minor trial, and the decision between what items to keep and what supplies to use or lose. I tried my best, genuinely, to have a good look at Darkest Dungeon 2, and the result of that look is that it's not a bad game, but far from a good one. I'd be lying if I said I was unconflicted. I came here for one thing and got gay porn, and every other line I write about this game always involves some mention of disappointment and the unfulfilled expectation of intrusive thoughts being whispered into my ear. So, in order to prevent the video from being just one big scream at the game for not being good enough, I decided that instead I'm gonna name a couple things that I like about the game in the following presentation that I don't remember making.
Welcome everybody, Shit here. Welcome to one of my famous top 10 lists. Today we're going over my favorite turn-based game rally, Darkest Asshole 2. I'm now going to tell you about my top 10 things from the hit game Roguelite Game Rally, Whack Ass Hot Wheels 2. Top 10 things I like about the game. Number 10, the slow ass, fuck ass, stupid ass car ride that you get into. I'm glad to know that even at the end of the world, Uber still works no problem. Number 9, it was developed in the 4th circle of hell. Number 8, the 3D art style is actually pretty cool. Number 7, weaponized trumpet. They weaponized trumpets. Weaponized trumpet. Number 6, my healer managed to pull off a critical zero heal, which impressed the entire party. And from there, they knew that they could trust him with their lives, because even if he wanted to kill them, they now know that he is too incompetent to pull it off. Number 5, I forgot. Number 4, every hero has a cool story in the game, except the runaway. Literally just insane. Number 3, that 1% disease resist you get from that very expensive upgrade. Pretty cool. I love garbage too. Number 2, I don't know. Honorable mentions the entirety of the leopard class and his subclasses. I wonder what the pick rate on this is. Number 1, my most favorite thing in the game. Number one, my most favorite thing in the game is how they refer to positive and negative tokens as buffs and debuffs in the list of tokens in the game. But never do they ever use that term ever again. I paid $25 for this game. What the shit, man? What the fuck?
I think the genre that suffers from the most amount of design problems is the roguelite genre. A lot of the systems have to be well thought out, otherwise you end up having little to no meta progression. Let me explain real quick what I mean by that. Meta progression is, simply put, the progression of your tactics as you play through the game. While a common thing in every game ever, it is especially an important concept in roguelites, because this genre of games shines the most when all the cool and wacky options are common. Let me give you an example of this concept taking place. We'll use Slay the Spire for this example, but don't worry, you don't have to know the game to understand what I'm trying to portray. Alright, let's start a new run. I feel like doing the assassin today. Gonna try to take out the elite on the left. Instantly, there are some interesting options. Triple poison would be powerful against the elite, though the dagger spray would be best for crowds. I chose the dagger spray. Once again, powerful choices. The poison would be good, but I can't pass up on that guaranteed value. Oh wow, double damage. I'm definitely doubling down on that. Elite time. The double damage is crazy, and I get out almost scratchless because of it. I'm not too confident, so I decide to avoid the super elite, and holy shit does it work out in my favor. This is a game changer. I simply can't pass that up. Oh man, now I have to think far in the future. I got quite the aggressive deck. Maybe I should go for something defensive. I'm upgrading the upgrade card. The snowballing begins. Another elite in the way, but now I'm super confident.
Holy mama, now we're cooking with liquid propane. My nipples are turning orange. I'm turning on the turbo thrusters. Let's get...
And with an upgrade like that, the run goes pretty smoothly from there, until the two hands where I fucked up and then I died at the heart, which is the secret final boss of the game. I want you to notice though how my decision making changed drastically depending on what I got, and at no moment was I ever bored by the loot. That's meta progression done right, and that decision making had a directly visible and powerful effect on the run. I became significantly more confident as I progressed. Now let's look at how DD2 does its meta progression. Alright, new run. Chapter 3 because it's the hardest one in the game. Alright, it took 20 minutes, but we made it to the first inn. I used some secret strategies to get some candles for later. Let's check the store. Not much. Gonna get the chance for whiskey item. Never saw these things work, but if it triggers twice, it'll be worth the price. I think. I hope. Well, slow start with little on the store. Cool trinket available though. 30 minutes in. Let's start this run.
What? What? What the fuck?
Okay, so remember the secret strategy that I mentioned? Well, they patched it, but not in a good way. We'll come back to this later, but for now, I have a point to make, so we're just gonna keep going. First fight, not good. Well, the loot sucks ass. Second fight, creature den. Shop discount on delivery. Okay, hopefully the store won't suck this time. Third fight, wow, 4 gold and a shit trinket. You may as well have given me nothing. Surgeon table. As much as I know I shouldn't, that's a double relationship point for free. I think I can pull this off. I just can't roll a ghoul on the second fight. Alright, looks good, sort of. It'll be slow, but we'll get there. No! God fucking man, now I'm gonna leave with no torch and no relationship points. You know what? Sure, whatever, do your thing, buddy. I didn't want to see where I'm going anyway. Light's overrated. We should blow up the sun. Well, that sucked ass. And the trinket sucks too. I don't know, maybe the shop will be better. As useful as the loot would be, I think this relationship might be salvageable if I retreat and get good luck at the shop. Oh, the first good piece of loot. Took long enough, god damn. Cash. Please be something good. I have a point to make here.
Ain't no way in hell that I got this piece of garbage. You can't make this shit up. What the fuck?
Well, the fishmonger gloves are okay. Unfortunately, I didn't choose any bleed characters. Another set of dog-ass trinkets. Can't use it because no disease, but oh well, maybe I'll get one later. They should put in a mechanic that allows you to go shopping for diseases in the local bathroom. And finally, the inn. Okay, the store sucks, but there's some relationship stuff. Maybe I can make this work? Alright, math time. Let's see here. Well, that's probably one of the worst ones out there. That's unfortunate.
It's a time for gambling.
Actually, you know what? I'm just gonna Google this. Alright, yeah, it's gambling, alright. It might serve at some point down the road, I guess, but... once again, more Gambelino. I'm Googling this. I refuse to play this on its own terms. Well, it's a chance for something good. And of course, it's ineffective against bosses. That'd be too good for this game. God forbid we have a sense of power scaling in a roguelike game. I'm also gonna go ahead and guess that some things are also bosses, but not named as such. Made it to the inn.
It's time for the gambling. Gambling.
Holy moly, no negative relationships. I gotta just seize it. No negative relationships. This is the only chance I'll get. I'm jumping on that boss like a homing missile.
And they frenzied. It's frenzied. They got the frenzy buff. It's the frenzy buff. It's the frenzy buff on a boss. Okay, this can only go well. Not bad. Seriously? That's it? Okay. When in doubt, robbery. Man, more garbage. Whatever, the stuff I got is good enough anyway. I just threw that away and I got it back. You can't make this shit up. What the fuck? Okay, that run had to have been the worst possible start I ever had in the game. We'll go over the secret strategy and what happened there way later in the video. As for the rest of the run, well, it went pretty well. Well, at least until the exemplar.
And in the northeastern corner, we got the gatekeeper, the run ender. An enemy so controversial and hated that the wiki page for him went down for an entire week. The exemplar!
Fuck this guy! I fucking hate this guy! I'm gonna suck his ass!
Nah, I'm kidding. I of course memorized the boss by this point. Fortunately, he's one of the many bosses that you can reliably keep under control if you understand and plan ahead for their mechanics. Unlike the Focused Fault, which is a boss that I have spotlighted so many times by now. You can know this boss, you can even plan ahead for it, and everything can still go out the window. None of the other bosses are like this. Crazy thing is, in the end of that run, it came down to a 60% chance coin flip. If the bleed landed, I would have done enough damage to win, and it didn't. That run was 4 hours, by the way. I could go on, seriously. But to get to the point, the center of a lot of my decisions through and through was the relationship system. It's just too invasive and too punishing, with the punishments severely outweighing the positives. It was through the intricate understanding of the game's mechanisms and chances, but mostly just luck, that I was able to recover things. I knew when I didn't get a negative relationship that I really had to press the advantage on that one and push it straight to the boss. I got pretty lucky with the drops there too. None of them are good per se, but there's some of the few that make a visible difference, and honestly, that's about the best that you can get in this game. Anyway, with the 4-hour run down the drain, I at least got myself some candles. Let's see what I could spend them on now. 5% chance for a death blow resist. Okay, how about a new subclass? I don't know what it involves, so I guess I have to unlock it to know. We'll find out what it has in the party creation screen. For now, I got some more left over. Time to gamble, I guess. Nothing good. Well, let's check out the subclass. Oh, it's pretty bad. Wow. I can't even imagine a place where this would work. Did they make this for the purpose of being bad? What? Right, I did some Googling around to see if you can make this viable. No, there's no way to make this work. Well, 4 hours of work and nothing to show for it. You know, if I was playing a phone game, by now I would have received 3 1-hour limited offers that show up every day, an email that involves corporate gaslighting, and a personalized threat from the game's CEO, and that phone game would have been way more fun. I paid $25 for this game. 25. I paid 25. I paid $25. 25. I paid $25. Meta progression here doesn't exist in the same way that it did for Slay the Spire. In here, I was just trying to avoid the punishments as opposed to the constant excitement that I had over every choice in Slay the Spire. My ability to recover that mess relied heavily on some math and my understanding of the game's uncommunicated intermechanisms. I fully understand that this game is meant to be difficult, but you shouldn't need this much foundational understanding of a game to be able to recover, and the first game didn't. Notice as well how every interaction with the stores that I had was always just me buying every relationship item I can find, and that chance item never worked. This is one of the elements of the problems with the game. It's a roguelite where the loot is just not that exciting, and keep in mind I'm playing on my main save file. I have all the cool stuff unlocked here.
Interesting action, opponent. Unfortunately for you, I will now use my special secret move. Napalm grenade.
I can speak from experience that it is definitely way worse if you're playing casually or, God forbid, just wasn't lucky enough to unlock the good shit at the gacha machine. Not to mention, if you don't have the relationship items unlocked, which will set you back 10 to 20 hours of gameplay, then you can't deal with the relationship system at all, and you're just at the mercy of RNG through and through. This loot factor is what makes or breaks a good roguelike game. It has to be well thought out, it has to matter and be visible in its effects. Making shit loot for the sake of having something that is bad is definitely one way of of doing it, but it's far from the best. Roguelites are made to be infinitely replayable. If the majority of the loot sucks ass, runs will feel repetitive very quickly. In Slay the Spire, the quantity of the loot isn't that high, and yet no two runs feel the same. That's because every piece of loot has a significant and visible effect. You never feel like you're making a bad choice until way later on when you have a build already going on. In Darkest Dungeon 2, there's no making a build later on. You can change subclasses, but it comes at an extreme price. Not to mention, some subclasses just outright do not work depending on what character you're running, which sucks twice as much when the entire game is heavily focused on planning ahead. The overwhelming majority of the loot has little to no visible effect. It's like they took the map mechanic of Slay the Spire without understanding what made it good in the first place. As a result of the majority of the loot sucking ass, your strategy, although might change in shape, always takes the same path. I've been playing the same thing for a while. I think I'll try something new for once.
There we go, much better. Look at that, it's practically a new team. Man, I'm so glad this game allows for diverse team building. Why did they ever think that it was a good idea to make it so that you needed more than 5 hours to fully unlock a new character? What a fucked up thing to do.
My strategy approaching the run was pretty much the same as it ever was. Build the relationships so you don't have to deal with them at the mountain, and outside of everything that you can buy at the shop, it's the most perceptible upgrade that you can get. So why buy anything else? Inherently, roguelites motivate you to play them repeatedly over and over till you build your knowledge on the game's most effective tactics, and if it's not well thought out, then the conclusion is going to be something along the lines of using more or less the same strategy over and over again. In this case, it's the same two heroes over and over again. None of them are particularly powerful, except the Plague Doctor, but the synergy they both have dominates some of the game's most inherent problems and problematic battles. A lot of curveballs get thrown at you in this game, so you're motivated to build one team that can deal with everything. And these two are universally agreed to be the best, because they have the only abilities that can deal with those mechanics effectively. Other characters can benefit heavily from having some of these abilities, but for whatever reason, only these two have them. For example, Darkest Dungeon 2 has some strict rules around healing, both for health and stress. They vary based on the ability, but are usually something along the lines of, you can't heal until you're 1 foot in the grave, saying some stupid shit like, can only heal when they're below 30% HP, which for low health heroes, or against high damaging enemies, and there's a lot of them, is just tons of fun. Tons of fun to play around with, tons of fun.
Holy fuck. Is he below 30% yet? Can I use a band-aid? Do I have permission to kiss his boo-boo? Will the ref allow a kiss to his boo-boo right now? Fuck me. What a motherfucker gotta do to get some healing in this game?
You know, as an avid Lovecraft reader myself, I have to say, nothing spells eldritch like American health insurance. Imagine being a priest, dedicated to God, and supporting your teammates out in the front. One of your dudes just got shot in the liver. Quickly, you get to doing what you do best, making a prayer and a donation to the local church to get your dude out of God's prematurely imminent reach. But after you do your part, God then says, sorry bro, request denied. Credit card declined. Your dude's not close enough to the grave to qualify for divine intervention. His ass is not grass. At least one of those cheeks need to turn green and spiky for one of the Lord's angels to then allow him access to a magnanimous critical zero heal.
Wow! God damn! He had the healer tag in the party creation screen, by the way. God damn! That shit was crazy! Leave some healing for the rest of us, buddy! Fuck right off!
Even with stress healing, you have to be at least halfway to a heart attack to qualify for your teammates to comfort you. I can tell though exactly how this change came to be. In fact, I can spell it in detail. I have a hidden talent when it comes to Red Hook Studios, a particular mental ability that I know how to use better than anyone else. That ability is called making shit up and being right at the end of the day. You see, I'm a bit of a Red Hook Studios whisperer. I know how to read them better than anyone else. Darkest Dungeon 1 has a very long history of controversial balance changes. There's a lot to say and even more to point out, but this video is already as long as half of the tutorials of the second game, so I'm just gonna get to the point. Whenever people developed an efficient way to play the game, the developers would do something to disrupt it. They tunnel visioned on this, so much so that they forgot several aspects on how the game works. In the first game, you would usually take more damage than you were able to heal, so stalling became the main strategy behind any optimized way to play the game. You simply would purposefully waste your turns or buy more time by stunning the enemy to let your healers do their thing and therefore prepare you for the next battle. Well, they added a reinforcement mechanic so that when the game detected that you were stalling, it would first inflict stress damage on your team and therefore you had to spend more time healing, then it would call a bunch of new enemies to the fight. The developers were so aggressive with their implementation that they forgot about accuracy in the game, because if you weren't trying to stall but just happened to miss some attacks, the game would still think that you were trying to stall. So sometimes you would get caught in an infinite loop of trying to kill the monsters but miss a couple of attacks, and then the game would call reinforcements, an entire group of goons ready to welcome you to the party. So the game right now is half playing the game and half tiptoeing around the anti-stalling system that they put in to try and recover from the damage that you take. How does this connect to Darkest Dungeon 2, you might wonder? Well, they really hated this sort of way of playing the game, that they overcorrected for it in Darkest Dungeon 2. Not only does it take 2 turns to pull off a single stun now, not only does the average enemy have quite a bit of stun resistance, not only have stuns been effectively removed from your arsenal, existing very rarely in certain abilities, not only is there an anti-stalling mechanic, but they also put strict rules on when you can heal your party along with ability cooldowns, saying some stupid shit like, you gotta be 1 foot in the grave before you can patch up those wounds. This sort of approach became iconic for me. I call it the evil gaze of Red Hook Studios. Dear Red Hook Studios, you put 2 in the name but forgot to put 2 in the game. It's not a sequel, it's a spin-off game, and you already scammed me into buying it. So please, let me have some fun. Let me play the game without arbitrary limitations, and the next time you make a roguelite, let people enjoy it the way God intended. A power fantasy with way too many layers to keep track of, but when I manage to, I win. And the next time you want to discourage stalling as a strategy, which I can understand, stalling isn't exactly a fun strategy to use, please instead consider allowing for a more viable and fun-oriented strategy and/or design, rather than limiting the hubris of the human mind using arbitrary restrictions. It wouldn't be called game development if the perfect solution was arbitrary limitations. That's just called the entirety of the Mongolian politics system. Now, I'm not superstitious, and I'm not a licensed therapist. I lost the license the moment I booted up this game because I needed a therapist from playing it. But if I was a therapist, I would diagnose Red Hook Studios with the big stupid syndrome, because they then put in 2 overpowered characters that more than overshadowed any other character in the game. Go look up guides on beating bosses. The overwhelming majority has a plague doctor and a man-at-arms on the team. And so, just as history is inevitable, Red Hook Studios' evil gaze would see resistance from the people and from the developers themselves, because for whatever reason they decided to give the most overpowered healing ability to a damage dealer. That's right, in Darkest Dungeon 2 they said fuck it, the best healer isn't just a damage dealer, but it's also a doctor. They say an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Quite the stark difference that the consumption of an apple can do to a man. You can tell they took some when they were making the first game, because in that game the doctor did no healing, only damage dealing. Then as the apple was slowly phased out of the diet, they made the doctor not just a good damage dealer, not just an overpowered healer, but also a really good tank, given enough beer and homosexual tendencies. They like to lie to you in this game, saying shit like healer in the tags of the characters, but there should have only ever been 3 tags in the entire game: defective, viable, and Vestal. Introducing the most overpowered team in the game: Vanguard, Man-at-Arms, really good at producing tokens; Alchemist, Plague Doctor, really good at turning those tokens into health. And while you can substitute the other 2 for a couple other characters, I typically use Yellow Highwayman because he has the only ability in the game that can deal with enemy critical tokens; and Vestal, mostly as a joke. I'm sure you're wondering, what would happen if you don't take Man-at-Arms or Plague Doctor? I made that mistake once and saw the game turn very quickly from a turn-based semi-roguelite to a visual novel about the many mistakes I made during the party creation screen. Now, you might remember, because I don't, somewhere in the intro of the video I said that the game degraded in some sections, such as the token system. The thing is, while the combat feels better because it's more consistent due to the token system, the way things are balanced is that the stuns are rarely worth it and disrupting enemy rank isn't worthwhile anymore. Everything around the combat has been practically removed, so everything just boils down into a DPS race. Maybe this token system would have been better if it had more nuance, but as it stands currently, there's so many different tokens when all the ones you need to care about are up here. In the first game, you had so many different ways of disrupting the enemy. Stuns were the dominant way because it was also the most guaranteed way, but you were able to move them out of their position, which would cause them to use a weak attack and so on. This is no longer the case in the second game. Stuns are more or less removed, and nearly all enemies can use any ability from any position, especially the dangerous enemies. They tend to have increased stun resistance too. It's like they want the game to be nothing more than a DPS race. The evil gaze of Red Hook Studios had struck once again. This time it targeted the design of the game. The token system may feel better initially, but the novelty wears out quickly enough when there's no room for varied playstyles, and the player numbers reflect this too. You're forced into a DPS race through and through, and if you don't like it, go play the first game. That's a sentiment I've seen get relayed quite a lot in the reviews. I can understand why they made it like this. They wanted stalling to be a dead strategy, but the thing is, nobody stalled in the first game out of fun. It was a necessary evil because on average you took more damage than you were able to heal. They've overfocused and tried to solve a problem that has deep roots into the design altogether, and in the process took a lot of shortcuts as well. Regardless of how many patches they put out, be they minor or major, there's nothing that can fix this aside from a categorical overhaul, and we will explore that a bit. So, to serve the purpose of an ultimate understanding on why things went sideways, let's talk about one of the most important and run-ending mechanics of Darkest Dungeon 2, gay porn. The relationship system was initially the main selling point of the game, but when they realized that selling homoerotic Lovecraftian fanfictions as a turn-based pseudo-roguelite might not be popular on the market, they slowly patched it across the years to be more low-key. Now, instead of an 11-minute unskippable cutscene of Highwayman and Crusader making out in the showers playing the moment you boot up the game, you instead get one porn magazine and 2 pieces of a charcuterie board.
Man, I love me some game mechanics. This is great. This is amazing. I wanna fucking kill myself.
Taking inspiration from Breeders of the Nephilim, they added a relationship system that's randomized but quite heavily biased towards making everyone hate each other. Imagine yourself in a team building exercise about who could make it to the coffee machine first. It wasn't immediately clear, but when a gun got pulled out on you by one of your colleagues in an attempt to slow you down and win the exercise, you knew that the spectrum was about to be the least of your worries. You tried to take it on a stride and make jokes about it, but unfortunately, your not-so-socially intelligent coworker didn't take it well, harboring resentment that would only reveal itself when you made it to the final boss, becoming an imminent and clear reason for the failure of the entire run. In similar ways, that is exactly how the relationship system works in Darkest Dungeon 2, and until you unlock the items that allow you to control it, which is gonna set you back anywhere between 1 to 20 hours depending on how lucky you are, you're at the complete unapologetic mercy of the random number generator of this game. Here's some of the things that typically take place in the shadowy realms of Crack-Ass Basement 2. Darkest Dungeon 2. More often than not, one of the characters is gonna be a complete coward, consistently begging you to retreat at the sight of any roadside battle. So of course, when you're trying to fight to get more money, to get more buffs to fight the final boss, the scared dumbass is gonna be ass mad that you're not a fellow fucker yourself. This has its perks, meaning that you can avoid battles sometimes. Of course, avoiding battles is never good for you, but after the 20th hour of watching this wacky ass, clank ass Maserati move at a snail's pace, sometimes I really just want to get it over with. And for whatever undetermined, unknowable reason, sometimes when you go to heal or buff someone that badly needs it, someone else might get mad that you didn't choose them, even though they're A-okay, and the other fucker is having a 3-course fully fledged conversation with the Grim Reaper itself. In most of my experience, when a certain duo hits 7 out of 20 towards each other, they start name-calling each other mid-fight, spreading gossip in the wagon that the other one has League of Legends installed on their computer. And when they stop playing the gossip game, not only do they become completely incapable of not insulting each other for 12 seconds, but they outright backstab each other mid-fight. The crazy part is that the backstab isn't even the worst part about this. The worst part about this is when a critical, commonly used ability becomes the center focus of the negative relationship. For example, consider the following, which unfolded in one of my runs. This is Boudica. Boudica prefers to be in the front of the fight, trading hits and standing toe-to-toe with the enemy. And this is Sajid. Sajid is my favorite. I keep him around to meet a meta diversity quota. He's supposed to be a healer. He has the healer tag in the character selection screen, but realistically, he more often than not fails to heal, doing more damage to the squad than the enemy boss does. Sajid is from India, and Boudica's fourth great-grandpa was born from Pakistan, so naturally they can't go 2 minutes without shit-talking each other. The breaking point, however, was when Boudica saw Sajid perform a critical zero heal. Critical heals are supposed to double the amount of healing done. However, 0 times 2 is still 0, effectively accomplishing the equivalent of watching paint dry on 2 times speed. Boudica, upon seeing such an extreme level of incompetence, became envious of Sajid. Whenever Sajid performs a pseudo heal, Boudica enviously asks, "What? How?" taking her eyes off the enemy to watch the pseudo heal take place, causing the next attack to have a reduced chance of landing. On the opposite end, Sajid, whenever Boudica catastrophically body slams the enemy, thinks to himself, "God, I wish that was me," and gets a little stressed out over it. By the way, I'm dead serious. According to the relationship system, this all canonically happens in the game. And now for a positive relationship example. 2 men, alone in the shower, complimented each other's balls. And from there, a death-defying sexually motivated relationship was formed, turning any malintent towards the enemy to be a little bit more than homosexually charged, with certain abilities causing them to be more steamed up than usual. A Lovecraftian doomsday narrative turns into a gay erotica fanfiction, with every slap on the ass causing the next hit to do more damage than the last. One of the meta strategies for most of the campaign bosses is homosexual tendencies. It's been subtle, but the other 2 party members no longer turn their back to the gay outback duo, in fear that a 50% damage buff might land uninvited. Now, I'm not gay, but maybe I should be, because it seems like a pretty good DPS strategy. It doesn't take a genius to see that a system like this is a step away from a Lovecraftian narrative. Lovecraftian stories in general are meant to be about a hopeless situation, about the fear of the unknown, about second-hand accounts of people who experience the indecipherable, the ineffable, the transdimensional. But when the team keeps flirting in the middle of a run, well, it takes you out of the immersion and takes a step closer to being a comedy game. It's not necessarily something I dislike, but as you've seen so far and eventually will, there's a lot of additions that just don't fit into a game like this. I feel pretentious saying this, but it genuinely seems to me that whatever the creative vision was for the game, it wasn't well thought out. I have to say though, the design choice to have it so that the relationship system is outside of your control completely until you unlock the items that allow you to try to control it after 10 hours or so of gameplay, and that's assuming you're lucky at the slot machine, it's just a terrible idea. The relationship system is just too biased. You lose 2 points every time you lose relationship points. You start 1 point shy of being in the middle. It tells you when you're gonna lose points from random actions, but it doesn't tell you when you're gonna gain points? Seriously? I haven't even mentioned the random effects it has that have no way of being predicted. This system is a way to throw a curveball onto the player, but in a game all about curveballs, well, it just doesn't make sense and feels nothing more than a slippery slope. Lose too many points and the relationship will never improve because they'll always be mad at each other, with the only way being out of this is to first get lucky at the gambling machine and then get lucky at the store and have the items show up to be able to use them on your party members. It's just too haphazardly put together, with even the writing being rough around the edges. Some of the writing of this game is just like Boudica no likey when anyone but Boudica touch salad ass. Even the items being questionable at best on how they improve the relationships, and don't even get me started about how they will just randomly lock you out of using them. Seriously, the alcoholic drinks, the only way to fight back against the bias of the game, can just get locked out randomly. There are ways to fight back against the lock, but that's even more luck. You know what? Sure. Whatever. I've been trying to avoid talking about the progression system because I'm trying to end this video and move on to something that's more fun to talk about than this mess. But we're already one homoerotic fanfiction in, so why not go the 9 miles? So now I'm gonna talk about something that invokes a trauma response every time I interact with it, because right after I make the mistake of choosing anything that isn't Man-at-Arms or Plague Doctor, the next 2 hours of gameplay turned into a very long-winded, unskippable cutscene that leads me directly to it. The altar of hope and the progression system of this game. Hell.
That's the progression system. You get money and you spend it on a door that leads you to 3 toilets, each one facing the other. It's so full of traps. Check this out. This is all real and in the game. Unlock heroes that are nerfed to the ground. Unlock subclasses that contribute nothing and sometimes make the hero do literally nothing for the rest of the game. There's so many traps here because you got heroes like the leper that you think, oh cool, they brought him back. No, they didn't. What they brought back was a reminder of a better time. You can unlock cosmetics that will reset after every run. You can unlock torches that make the game more difficult and give you nothing in return. You know, while the narrative of the game focuses on the mistakes of the protagonist, I'm starting to think that the design choices for this game might be an allegory for an abusive relationship. Because even on a successful run, which will set you back a good 3 hours, you will get a total of 50 candles and a sober reminder that some people paid $40 for this game. Half the shit in this game requires the candle currency in the hundreds. You can beat the entire game and still not have half the things in this game unlocked. When combined with the fact that the only consistent way to handle the relationship system is by gambling away at the gacha machines to unlock the few and only items that allow you to reliably control it, and then have them not show up at the shops on a run that's about to reach a boss, you have a recipe for a mostly positive rated game on Steam that's 5% away from a mixed rating. About 90% of the items you unlock are gonna be hot garbage. We're talking 10 different versions of the same trinket, 3 versions of every other trinket, 3 versions of every trophy, and 9 reasons why I should have stopped playing this game forever ago. Not to mention, you have to unlock hero skills by finding a shrine by pure luck out in the wild. And every hero needs 5 shrines to unlock all of their skills. There's 12 heroes in total, which is gonna require a total of 60 visits to the shrine. There's also the bounty hunter, which you can unlock for a chance to play as him. The game never says it, but you can never take him to the mountain. There's quite a few places where you're never told what you're investing into. Like a loot box from any game with a season pass, we're gonna need you to pay $12 for a chance at a naked skin of a man. But the skin is holographic and the chance is below 0. This is of course never communicated unless forced by law, leaving you with a sense of pride and accomplishment according to a spokesperson. I haven't even mentioned that they don't let you see what abilities are locked. So some characters, like the Jester, are gonna look really bad until you fully unlock them. There's also a considerable amount of abilities and subclasses that are just bad for the sake of being bad. They took the same philosophy of making the trinkets and applied it to the subclasses too. Initially, I was gonna sit here and critique things with a lot more detail, but honestly, it's just bad, and one quick look at the trinkets of the game spell that story. 10 different versions of the same trinket, 3 of every other trinket, 3 of even the boss trophies, you know, the shit that you have to work hard to get, and you'd think at least that the high rarity stuff must be really good, but even on the highest rarity you get garbage like this. 20% on a crit, and it doesn't even affect bosses. Here's a quick look at the math of that. So a high base critical chance is about 15%. That means every time you use this ability, there's a 15% chance of landing a critical, and after landing the critical, there's a 20% chance of the trinket working. Again, a reminder that this doesn't affect bosses. That averages to about 3% chance for it to go off at any given dice roll, assuming 15% base crit chance. Well, you can get critical tokens that guarantee a critical on the next hit, but the only consistent way to do that is to spend a turn to get the token on Highwayman, and after doing that you still need to win the 20% chance for it to go off. That's 2 turns for a 20% chance. By that point, some characters would have already killed the ad in question. Anyway, I think I proved my point, and I'm pretty sure an artery just popped. So let's move on to yet another disappointing reminder of the people that paid for this game, including me. Let me tell you about the story. It's horrible. Horrible. Dog shit. I'm now in chapter 1 of the game, and the story so far makes no sense. I'm now in chapter 2, and I'm pretty sure that the game just called me gay. I'm now in chapter 3 of the game. The story still makes no sense. I'm now in chapter 4. Anyway, the new balloon boss is hard to deal with. I'm now in the final chapter of the game. The story makes sense, but doesn't make sense. You get 2 pictures per story drop per campaign mission, and that's all you get for the visuals. The entire story is told backwards in pieces with only 1 major story bit per mission. There's only 5 missions, and my team keeps fucking each other when I'm trying to get immersed.
Hello everyone, Hemorrhoids here, back at it again with another happy analysis of the hit game popular amongst the teens, the sequel to one of my favorite turn-based games of all time. You know it already, say it with me, Darkest Dungeon 2. In today's examination, we're gonna check out how the story is told and what it's trying to say. And I'm gonna do that while trying my best to follow my doctor's orders and be as happy as I possibly can to avoid popping another artery. How about an exercise? Just you, me, a severe lack of supervision, and the bitter absence of the $25 I spent on this game. Open up Notepad on your computer. Now, I'm gonna play the entire intro of Darkest Dungeon 1 and then 2. And after each intro, I want you to write what you think the story is about in a small paragraph with no outside bias or preconceived notion. Just take the intro for what it is. Ready? Here we go.
Ruin has come to our family. You remember our venerable house? Opulent and imperial, gazing proudly from its stoic perch above the moor. I lived all my years in that ancient, rumor-shadowed manor, fattened by decadence and luxury. And yet I began to tire of conventional extravagance. Singular, unsettling tales suggested the mansion itself was a gateway to some fabulous and unnameable power. With relic and ritual, I bent every effort towards the excavation and recovery of those long-buried secrets, exhausting what remained of our family fortune on swarthy workmen and sturdy shovels. At last, in the salt-soaked crags beneath the lowest foundations, we unearthed that damnable portal of antediluvian evil. Our every step unsettled the ancient earth, but we were in a realm of death and madness. In the end, I alone fled laughing and wailing through those blackened arcades of antiquity, until consciousness failed me. You remember our venerable house, opulent and imperial. It is a festering abomination. I beg you, return home, claim your birthright, and deliver our family from the ravenous, clutching shadows of the darkest dungeon.
Now that it's over, write down your thoughts on what you think the story is. Pause the video and continue when you're done. Now, let's watch the intro of Darkest Dungeon 2.
Ruin has found you at last. My protege, my friend. Our calculations were correct. The ephemeral equation is unbalanced. The Earth spins on a strange and terrifying new axis. And everywhere, unbridled consequence. The world is a wasteland of failures past. And yet, you must ride out into it, unafraid. Take this. It is hope, the very last of it. It is yours now. You were bold once. Be bold once more. Free yourself from this suffocating stillness. Fix your gaze on the horizon and face the fearsome truth.
of the darkest dungeon.
Cool. Now, once again, write down your thoughts on what you think the story is in another paragraph. Pause the video until you're done. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and guess that you didn't know what to make out of the second one's intro. That's because it's unclear. Ephemeral calculation, strange new axis, a vertically challenged destination? Also, why'd the ding-dang damn door need to be destroyed? Can't the ghoulish apparition use the doorknob like a normal entity, or do four-dimensional figments of the imagination harbor some sort of spiteful anger towards doors? Anyway, I was actually considering to retell the entire story since it's short but revolves around a really cool premise, but I decided not to, because nothing describes it better than the intro. You're being told some exposition with a lot of missing context. The entire game is like this, and the missing context is partially revealed during chapter 4 and 5. Of course, there's still a lot missing, but it gives you just enough to put enough things together to be able to understand most of the story. And I don't mean this in the Elden Ring or Dark Souls sort of storytelling. You don't unlock things and key information as you go. There's no second-hand accounts or even NPC dialogue to have. The entire story is told in one of two places, at the mountain and at the start of the game. That's it. There's no item descriptions, no surrounding detail or environmental storytelling, just exposition with missing context. While the entire game takes the theme of the game in every aspect, there still yet remains a massive amount of plot holes. It's like putting together a jigsaw puzzle, except that there's still a lot of pieces missing, and the pieces you have don't fit anywhere, but you still have just enough to be able to make out the overall story. Also, and I shit you not, while the entire game doesn't contain a single dungeon, the game pulls off the classic "it's all in the head" type of story, referring to the human mind as the darkest dungeon at the end of the game. Yeah, they did that! They actually pulled that off! That's in the game! What a fucking cop-out! It's an unpolished mess of a game, full of a lot of interesting ideas, but executes them in a rushed and poor manner. Even when I let go of the notion that it should be anything similar to the predecessor, it still falls short. Even years after its launch, it still feels like it's in early access. And more than that, it's an identity crisis, with features that resemble the identity of character permanence akin to the predecessor, but it keeps deleting and resetting them. You can rename a character, but the name will reset every time and it doesn't even get archived, so what's the point? You can choose cosmetics, but they will also reset every time. You can also choose ability hotkeys, but even that resets every time. Even the camera, while inspecting the cosmetics, will just reset on its own.
Yeah, boy. Got me some new gear. Got me some of that rig. Time to check out the tassets. Time to check out the... Why is the camera like that? Give me back the controls, bro. I'm trying to check out the tassets. Oh, you're gonna be like that, huh? Okay, yeah, no, we can both fight out about this. It's okay, I don't mind a Beyblade match. Let's go, motherfucker. I'm checking out the tassets, and you're not gonna stop me. I'm gonna get a good look at them tassets. I'm looking at those tassets. I'm gonna check out the tassets. I'm checking out the tassets. I paid for that shit. I paid for it. I paid. Let me check out the tassets. Give me the shit.
I'm well aware of the stupid that took place when I bought this game with little to no research done, but the first game was all about figuring out the unknown, and the more research you do, the less unknown it is. In other words, or well, more specifically, the words of myself from 3 a.m. the day before.
Foolishness was my unmedicated hubris, Dante. For just as much as I loved the core gameplay loop of the first game, unseen it was by me that they would take what countless have loved and turn it into a glorified high fantasy Hot Wheels racetrack. What the fuck?
I fully understand that it's my fault I bought this game relatively blind, and while I will always discourage pre-orders, there's a select few and far between purchases where I went against that thought, and would you believe me if I said that in my years of practicing this, things only ever went wrong once before, with Darkest Dungeon 2 being the first regret I ever have. Anyway, the video ends now. I can't wait to play games that are worth my money. I could talk more about Kingdoms, but honestly, I thought nothing nothing puts it better than this post by the developers, where a central, important mechanic of the entire game mode was so undiscovered by the people who played it that they put out a post telling people about it rather than putting in an in-game pop-up or tutorial telling you about it. Hatred has dissipated, and I feel a bit better now. Alright, time to drop this project and disappear for another month. Thank you for watching. Unsubscribe from the Patreon because the videos take too long to come out, and report this video for being about Darkest Dungeon 2. See you next time when I make a review about a game I actually like the racism game, or the game that controls the entire economy of Venezuela. Bye-bye, 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 bye-bye. Or at least, that's where the video was supposed to end for the third time. But then, as I was editing the video, I came across a couple weird details that, when investigated, caused a revelation. Here's some of my raw reaction to it. Wait a minute. Did I see that right? Oh, fucking Christ! The wicked token that's supposed to reduce damage by 50% doesn't actually consistently do that? Whatever, I'm moving on. It went through. It went through again. What? I got 85% resistance. How the fuck is it going through? It turns out that that's because it ignores resistance, and nowhere in the game is that information available whatsoever. This isn't the first case like this. It's simply one of the few that I actually investigated thoroughly. Which then prompts the question, if the game is this neglectful with the basic information that it should be putting forward clearly, how far does the rabbit hole go?
Hello everyone, Future Hermos here. Too many hours of research later, at the end of my rope,
I walked in so biased in favor of this game, but the game wasn't only not a sequel, but it wasn't even good on its own foot. And I tried so hard to avoid being extremely subjective about the game, with the reviewer in me even dividing the video into two parts initially, because I knew I couldn't stop myself from critiquing it mid-sentence unless I did so, with the first part explaining the game and the second part being my criticism. But you know, now, after all my research, I reject this notion altogether. I'm right. I'm damn right. And I will prove it too. I could of course sit here, explain the thousands of problems of the game, explain what I found, what's slapping, what's cracking, but you know what? I'm gonna be real, I'm gonna be honest. I can't do it anymore. And even if I could, what's the point? Because I've already said enough. I hate.
Oh, Bowser can't keep it in again, boys. I fucking hate this game.
Hello everyone, Famous Game Reviewer here, back at it again with another filler video that's taking a little bit longer than 2 weeks, which is the time period I set out to make this video in. You're probably wondering, where is this magic ass school bus going now? Usually I have a policy on my channel that I would exclusively talk about or do things that I like doing, if you can believe it. This video is the first time I go against that policy, ever since its creation, and in the wise words of a person called Clown That Eats Garbage, who eventually died from eating garbage. If you're gonna fuck up, and you know it's a fuck up, then you better fuck up so damn hard till you can't unfuck the up without fucking it down. That way, any and all lessons that can be learned will be as clear as day. After a recent revelation about the game that I've chosen not to detail, because not only will this video triple in length, but I will also lose my mind in the process of explaining it, I've decided, instead of showing any of that, to fully give in to the thought process. You see, Darkest Dungeon 2 is not a sequel or a good game, and frankly, a bit of a scam. And in all of my research about the game on YouTube, I found that there was an extreme lack of criticism about it, and so I've chosen that for the first time, instead of critiquing it and moving on with my life, that I will instead opt into giving this matter my all, to become the ultimate symbol of anger, a deity of hatred, a paragon of spite, a perfect misrepresentation to any and all of those who got scammed by the terrible labeling of this game. And I will do that using a degree of objectivity so unparalleled in autism that most of you are probably gonna skip through this section of the video if you're even still watching. Welcome to the nerdy part of the video. Things are gonna get very serious and boring from here, or at the very least to the highest limits that the medication will allow. Here's my last attempt at recording this section. Would you believe me if I said that was the second best take I had of this section of the video? Anyway, you see, I think there's actually a couple nice lessons to be learned from what happened with this game, and I'll go over them eventually. But first, let me explain what's about to happen. Similarly to the chaos that typically ensues when the teacher forgets the special ed kid class door open, I may have hyperfixated for a couple of weeks and read 3,000 reviews on Steam for Darkest Dungeon 2. I'm not obsessed. I can quit at any time. I then sorted the details of those reviews in a spreadsheet based on my criticism so far, with some additional things that I'll explain soon enough. This is all to get a better idea of what people feel like about the game. That way, I can name and shame them to the best of my ability. As you probably guessed, my measuring stick for my objectivity will be the opinions of the masses. That way, if the majority agree that something is what they believe it is, that's probably the closest you can get to objectivity in an environment all about subjectivity. Now, I know what you're thinking. You read 3,000 Steam reviews. Wow, great job, Hermos. It sounds like your ADD medication is working a little too well for your own good. Because what the fuck will reading so many reviews do, bro? There's due diligence and then there's unhinged overcommitments. What the fuck do you think this is? And if you thought that, then you would be editing Hermos, cut this part out. You see, I'm a bit of a Steam review addict. I engaged with it for so many years. It's less about the opinion and more about how socially questionable the person is. Because any normal review, and the overwhelming majority of people, will simply post that the game is ass or that the game is grass, with some surface level reasons on why the game is that way, and then move on with their day. However, if you go to check the top reviews on any game, it's always someone that's a little bit on the spectrum. Reading so many opinions from so many people is bound to lead us to read the opinions of those that are more socially questionable than I can show for this video. So before I delve into the meat and potatoes of the spreadsheet itself, here's some interesting things I found during my delve that I didn't cut from the video. The EULA of the game is a bit questionable and might be completely invalid. The strange disagreements about roguelikes and roguelites, Slay the Spire, and the ridiculous comparisons, and the DLCs. And I'm now about to delve into all of that before I even get into the spreadsheet. Just when I thought that the video was gonna end after over 6 months of making it, the rabbit hole grows deeper. Something I saw pop up time and time again was mentions of the EULA being quite unhinged in the reviews, with the most referenced sections being sections 5 and 14 of the end user license agreement. So I took the time to check it out. Section 5 states the following: General access. We also reserve the right in our sole discretion to terminate your access to all or part of the game or to any product or service available through the game or any Red Hook website for any reason or no reason, with or without notice. Now, that sounds crazy, but due to an autistic binge from a couple years ago, I understood that this is lawyer speak, which is a little bit different from normal people speak. And since my knowledge on law is mostly cursory these days, I decided to take the time to not only refresh my memory, but also to become a little bit smarter on the matter. I sent some emails here, some messages there, looked up a couple examples, and now I can definitively say that this is definitely insane, even for lawyer speaking standards. This section only makes sense to me as a ban section, which would protect the game if they were to ban you from the multiplayer part of the game or something like that, which doesn't make any sense in the context of Darkest Dungeon 2 because it's exclusively single player. Even if they can ban you, what would they ban you from? Now for section 14, and it states consent to monitoring. When you are using the game may monitor your computer's RAM for unauthorized third-party programs that interact with the game, probably cheat engine, and are prohibited by this agreement. If the game detects an unauthorized third-party program, probably cheat engine, the game may, without notice to you, communicate that information to us, including your account information, IP address, details about the unauthorized program, and the time and date that the unauthorized third-party program was detected. If the game detects the use of an unauthorized third-party program, your access to the online portions of the game may be terminated. You hereby consent to this monitoring. Now, this one sounded to me like an anti-cheat section, because one of the more common ways to cheat in Darkest Dungeon is by altering the memory, which is again strange, because Darkest Dungeon 2 is exclusively single player with no online functionality. There's analytics collection, but that's about it, and they're definitely not gonna ban you from giving them your information. So why would they monitor your RAM? And more importantly, why would they want identifying information? Even if they were collecting your information for the sake of improving sales or even selling it, something just sounded off about this. Initially, I was gonna spend a lot of time digging deep and talking to lawyers developers to fully understand the reasons behind a EULA like this. But then I realized, a critical revelation occurred to me. Hey, hold on, wait a minute, everyone cease all operations. This is Red Hook Studios we're talking about, and nobody knows them better than my imagination does. So just as I already have done once before, I'm gonna do it again to utilize a critical and powerful mental faculty that I have. The ability to make shit up and be right at the end of the day. When I started utilizing that ability, so much already made sense, because I recognized the entirety of this EULA to be the same EULA from the first game, but it's not a complete copy-paste. There's exactly 2 differences between them. This letter here is capital, and there's a space bar at the end. Interesting. Fantastic. Exclusive. So they didn't completely rush it when they copy-pasted the same EULA from the first game. The EULA makes much more sense in the first game. Section 5 makes sense because it would legally protect Red Hook if they were to ban you for cheating in the PvP arena. And Section 14 also makes sense because their anti-cheat system is to monitor the RAM. If you're modifying the RAM, you would of course get automatically flagged, your information reported, and then most likely later on banned. Banned. Most likely later on banned. I'm making shit up. And I'm probably right, but something doesn't sit right with me. Something about that sentence isn't normal. Banned. Banned. They would ban you for cheating, of course. Of course. Right? Interesting. Hello everyone, future hermos here. While I still do intuitively believe that they probably ban repeat cheaters, I have to admit that I might be wrong about it, because I couldn't find a single example of a ban or even what it looks like to be banned. I could of course look deeper into the matter, but aside from the fact that I'm making a video that doesn't like me, and I don't like it, I'm currently 6 months into making a video that probably won't get more than 12 views. So, I'm making an executive decision. I'm not gonna dive into this rabbit hole. Back to past Hermos, who is currently mumbling insane ramblings and is probably right. Okay, so we've concluded that the EULA makes sense for the first game and that it doesn't make sense for the second game, but I also previously said that Section 5 is a bit insane even for lawyer speak. Any reason or no reason, with or without notice, it's a bit unhinged, but why is it like this? This is where things get complicated. Red Hook Studios, at the time of creating the EULAs of their games, were a group of indie devs. Indie devs, usually, are passionate about the game development aspect. They are not, however, passionate about the legal and extensively long and boring aspect of making games. And if they were to ban you from the game or a section of the game, for example the PvP arena, for any reason, regardless of how valid it is, you could argue in court that it isn't fair for them to do that, as it was never stated anywhere that cheating wasn't allowed, and therefore would cause a lot of legal headache for them. Even if Red Hook was to win, the soundness of your argument alone would likely allow for a judge and or jury to hear you out. That alone would cause years of headache. To resolve these things, EULAs and terms of service agreements exist, but indie devs don't usually know how to make them, so they either use a template and fill it with bullshit that they think is right, or they contact a law firm to do it for them instead. Judging by how the EULA is written, it was probably a law firm. So we've established how the EULA was most likely made, or as I said in a now redacted take, my ass has spoken, and my ass is probably right. Now, previously I said that Section 5 is insanely written even for lawyer speak. Why is it this insanely written? Well, that's because amongst lawyers there exists a couple schools of thought. For the sake of time, I'm only gonna brush over 2 of them here today. The first school of thought believes that they should limit themselves in contract to what they will allow the company to get away with in good faith, assuming they have dignity. The second school of thought believes that the only thing that matters is victory above all else. So they tend to write very broad statements full of very insane sounding words that are meant to excuse whatever the company does should things ever reach the courtrooms. I believe the law firm they contacted most likely resides in the second school of thought. Anyway, here's an interesting find. Many EULAs tend to have unenforceable clauses, sometimes knowingly so, and the usual reason is to deter people from doing certain actions in the first place. Which begs the question, is Section 5 an enforceable EULA? Well, hello again, future tired ass here, tired of editing the video. It was confirmed to me by a community manager, who I'll leave outside of this, that any and all Steam developers have full access and control to who can and can't access their games. In a cursory search to find a single example of a developer wrongly revoking access to a game, I have found none. So, can the EULA be wrongly abused? In theory, yes, but in practice, I found nothing. What I did find is examples of copies being revoked for two reasons. One reason is fraudulent transactions, so the game was bought with a stolen credit card or the purchase was charged back after it was done. The other reason is beta testing reasons. Sometimes a certain build of the game will be given for beta testing, and the developers involved eventually shut down the servers once the beta testing period is over, and so they revoke your access to that build of the game. Back to a now out of context section of the video, because everything previous to what you're about to hear got deleted. Wow, I love spending 6 months to make a single video. Wow, I didn't know I could make so many things up like that and still sound like I'm within the realm of reality. That's a bit insane. But you know what's truly insane is that the entirety of the EULA of the second game might just be completely invalid. I couldn't find anyone talking about this, so how about we have a little bit of fun? I'm gonna read the paragraph that contains the silver bullet. Let's see if you catch it the same way that I did. End user license agreement and terms of service. This agreement is between you and Red Hook Studios regarding the Darkest Dungeon computer game and all related software, files, documentation, updates, upgrades, and derivative works. Red Hook developed and owns the game and is licensing the game to you on the terms and conditions set out below. Did you catch it? They don't say Darkest Dungeon series. They don't say Darkest Dungeon franchise. They don't even say Darkest Dungeon 2. They say Darkest Dungeon, the computer game. Also, it's not called Darkest Dungeon, it's called Darkest Dungeon Registered. So you can argue that the end user license agreement of the second game does not involve the second game. And according to a lawyer that I emailed about this, he actually thinks the argument could have some validity to it. Do I think Red Hook Studios are criminals? No. They probably just amateurs, and they took the path of least resistance when they copy-pasted the entire EULA of the first game to the second game. I hate them for what they did to the $25 that were once in my pocket, but I also like being fair about things when there's multiple sponsors and shareholders holding a bag of money over my head. Now, in the same spirit of Red Hook wanting to avoid legal headache, I will now state a similar legal cop-out that involves some legally important sentences. None of this is legal advice, it is simply my ass speaking, and my ass is probably right. While I was reading the more extraterrestrial reviews on Steam, I found myself running into a high amount of reviews that called the game a roguelike and a roguelite, sometimes interchangeably. Righteous in my belief that the game is a roguelite and eager to express my commitment to hatred immediately, I went out looking for a solid example to disprove the many wrong reviews that I had seen, only to find something even more confusing. I was both right and wrong, depending on who you ask, because the very definition of roguelikes and roguelite had been around for so long and changed so much that the original rogue game that started the genre is now considered a roguelike. But still, with a heart motivated with nothing but hatred, I still look to express it upon every unsuspecting Steam review that went against my belief. So, I asked the people around me, name 3 games that you think are a roguelike or a roguelite and then say which one you think is which. And well, it didn't take long for me to realize that that was probably a bad idea, because things only became more confusing. Slay the Spire's Steam tags say it's a roguelike. I think it's a roguelite. 2 friends said it's a roguelite. A resident in the Discord server says it's a roguelike. And according to a poll I did, 75% think it's a roguelike, 25% think it's a roguelite, and 100% think it's heroin. One person said Hades is a roguelike. Others said it's a roguelite. The Steam tags say it's both. Enter the Gungeon. I think it's a roguelike. A friend said it's a roguelite, and the Steam tags think it's an action roguelike. Darkest Dungeon 2, advertised as a roguelike, yet it has the tag of a roguelite. The reviews says it's both, and I'm too angry to think. If I was to put everything I found into this one video, we'd be here all day. Now, I'm willing to do that, kinda, but the problem is, we have already been here all day, and you can't fit 2 days in one just yet. So here's an extremely reductive explanation of this mess. The rogue formula and genre in general, due to its popularity, seems to have underwent a severe mutation across the years, so much so that there now exists various schools of thought regarding it. The more commonly detailed agreements state that roguelikes should denote that future runs cannot be influenced, and roguelite denote that future runs should be influenceable in some way, usually to make them easier. By that definition, Darkest Dungeon 2 would be a roguelite, and Darkest Dungeon 1 would be a roguelike. There is, of course, a lot more reasons on why either of them can feel like a roguelike or a roguelite, but out of the reasons that everyone mentioned, this seems to be the most commonly mentioned reason. However, all of that wasn't something that I thought about initially, so that leaves us with one last question. What is my definition for roguelikes and roguelites? Initially, I was gonna do another deep dive to fully understand what school of thought I belong to, but after finding out how complicated things were, I said to myself, fuck that. So here's the answer that I made up after I ran out of time that most aligned with me. I don't know. I'm just here to be mad at people who disagree with me. Alright, this one's kinda interesting. Something I saw happen quite a lot is people mentioning or comparing this game with Slay the Spire. And when I had seen this initially, I thought to myself, you smell that? It smells like stupid in here, because a cursory glance is more than enough to understand that they're too different to compare, other than the fact that one game is heroin and the other game is shit. I do believe that nothing happens for no reason, so I put on the coffee-stained lab coat and delved into the matter, and I found a couple things that are interesting. When it comes to the rogue genre, usually the biggest in that genre tend to inspire a sub-genre of themselves. It's how the term mutated so much in its meaning across the years. Pieces of the formula taken from one game to the other, just inspiration after inspiration so many times across the years. That might just be what happened with Darkest Dungeon 2, because if you can believe it, Darkest Dungeon 2 is inspired by Slay the Spire. It's hinted and touched on in several interviews with the developers. It's clear Slay the Spire had an influence on Darkest Dungeon 2. The obvious thing that they took away is the map mechanic and possibly the loot. However, they integrated their own spin on both of them and it ended up meshing pretty badly with the rest of the game. Their take on the map mechanic is pretty boring, taking over 30% of the playtime just for the sake of immersion, and all there is to do during that time is watch the Maserati move around at a snail's pace. It's also evident that they tried to take away the loot aspect of Slay the Spire, but they make the classic roguelite mistake of having so much garbage in the loot pool that unlocking new items further dilutes the pool of items that you can get, with over half the unlockable items in the game not even being better than the stuff you have unlocked by default. Even with unlocking new abilities for heroes, there's a trade-off there too. Yes, you get new abilities, but not only are most abilities pretty bad, but also now when you get a positive relationship, you increase the chance of the relationship picking an ability that you're not using, because it chooses randomly between what you have unlocked. This happens quite a lot more than you'd expect. Inspiration can be a fairly easy trap to fall into. You can take the good aspects of another game but make up other stuff that don't mix well with it. And when it comes to the rogue genre in general, I think this is more common than any other genre. In the first game, every DLC expanded on the game in some way. The Crimson Court added a new map with a lot of bosses, mobs, a heavily invasive mechanic, and it ramped up difficulty quite harshly, more than what most would have liked to see. Personally, I liked the difficulty, but there were certain fights that were harsher than most of the bosses in the DLC. The DLC was about $10. The Color of Madness added an endless mode and a lot of interesting trinkets. It was balanced in such a way that it only made sense to be explored in the mid-late game, as a lot of grinding was required. Still though, it was something new and it only costed $5. The Shield Breaker was a single character DLC featuring the highest DPS of any character in the entire game, but coming at the cost of no stuns in the abilities set. This is probably the closest the game ever got to being pay to win. The DLC costed $4. All of the DLCs were pretty cool. They all came with something that was both interesting and annoying, but as someone who just loved the base gameplay loop so much, I didn't mind it for the most part. I wonder how the DLCs are like in the second game. Well, brother, you're in for a wild-ass scam and a half. You have no idea! Look, they're both character-based DLCs. One introduces 2 characters and the second introduces only one. They're both $10. They're the type of DLCs that only make sense to buy if you already like the core gameplay loop. But by no means do they add or expand to the game in any significant way. Since I had already been scammed by the developers into buying a falsely advertised game, it's safe to say that I practiced the ways of my own spirit animal, trying before buying. I played with cheat engine, setting the game speed to ×12, because for whatever reason, they made the DLCs as grindy as the rest of the game. The first DLC is quite annoying. The Binding Blade is $10 for just 2 characters. You also don't get them with all of their abilities, so that's about 6 hours of grinding minimum required before we actually get to explore them. On top of that, and get this, the second character, Crusader, yes, they paywalled the Crusader from the first game, is locked. You have to complete a quest to unlock him, and once you unlock him, by the way, they again don't let you have him with all of his abilities. So again, you need to spend 6 hours minimum to unlock his abilities after the quest. But whatever, let's go do the quest. Let's check it out. Now it's important to note that I came to this DLC after doing Kingdoms, so when I saw the quest item, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I'm mentioning this because when the DLC came out, Kingdoms wasn't a thing, so the mechanic of the quest items via the trophies was new and not well communicated by this point in the game. Usually with these quests, there's a bit of trial and error. You guess what it could could possibly mean and try to pull through with it. But in this case, I happened to guess every step correctly in the first try, and I still couldn't complete the quest in one run. Fortunately, it saves your progress and the trophy doesn't expire, so if you know what to expect, you can choose when to do it. By this point, I had reached the final step of the quest, which caused me to experience a dilemma. I can unlock the Crusader right now, but following the logic of kingdoms, that would then consume the trophy most likely, and if I lose the trophy, I would no longer be able to bypass the entry requirement to the mountain. I was already more than 3 hours in, so the sunken cost fallacy got the better of me. I slapped the quest trophy on and went forward. Since this was my first try, I was caught off guard by the game. You're forced into a fight with a boss to unlock the Crusader. Once again, I first tried it, unlocking the Crusader, and yet the grind wasn't over yet. I had to now take him to 5 shrines and get about 50 candles to fully unlock him. If I didn't have any leftover candles, that's another 6 hours worth of work just to unlock a character you would have already paid for. I wanted to cut corners and try to finish as soon as possible, so I abandoned the run after finishing the quest and did a new one to start unlocking his abilities right away. 2 grindfests later, now for the review on the characters. My estimation of the characters are gonna depend on how well they can work with Plague Doctor and Man-at-Arms on the team. This is because the entire game is designed around those two, and as such, they are the best that the game has to offer. I'm not just saying this subjectively, I'm also saying this statistically. The Crusader is an awkward frontline character, capable of a lot of things but not good at any one of them, seemingly at his best when dancing with Holy Lance and used as a support. It's important to note that after unlocking him, you now have an increased chance of running into a boss, specifically the Warlord, which passively makes the game harder. You're also not guaranteed good rewards from the fight. 2 of the subclasses leave a bit more to be desired as they nerf him in some sort of significant way. As for the third subclass, well, it was made using Red Hook's classic wacky-ass balancing philosophy. Get this, the description says it gives him improved reach, but they forgot to give him the improved reach. Overall, I would bargain to say that not unlocking the character is actually better than having the character, because you can just keep using the trophy to bypass the entry requirement for the mountain if you don't unlock him. On top of that, you wouldn't have an increased chance of running into a boss at barricades. As for the duelist, well, she's similar to Grave Robber in so many ways. She's a dancing character with a riposte and various potent debuffs and buffs. She's mechanically complicated, being the first character to use orange tokens as more than just a buff in her kit. She's very clearly inspired by the Wraith class from Slay the Spire, having 2 different stances that alter the effect of some of the abilities. Learning her was definitely annoying, and I could talk about her a bit, but I think the best way to tell you how I feel about her is to tell you how I feel about the game's heroes in general. It's kind of a recurring issue with the heroes in the game that a lot of them are awkward with no ability to really move out of that awkwardness that they often find themselves in. Some characters are more capable at moving out of it, like Cultist and Highwayman, but you never really have characters like Plague Doctor and Man-at-Arms that are consistently able to contribute meaningfully in every situation they get into, which is why I have nearly every character in the game on C tier. Duelist as a character feels painfully similar to Grave Robber, in that the kit itself is not bad, but the numbers are painfully low on average. She's capable of contributing in some scenarios, though she often requires a lot of forward thinking and a considerable amount of team setup for what feels like a slightly above average payback at its peak. And so, as you can imagine, she's not very easy to use. When I wanted her to do damage, she had an ability that can do that. When I wanted her to stun, she had the ability. When I wanted her to dodge or riposte, she got the stuff for that too. But more often than not, I wasn't able to do them, usually because someone got pushed, blinded, or critted. Even the riposte didn't always make sense to use, because she has an extremely low health bar. She's dancing party material, but in all of my attempts, I couldn't really make dancing teams work. Usually because the game revolved heavily around dealing damage quickly, especially for bosses, something that dancing teams often required setup and some luck to get. Her subclasses also explore her mechanically, adding even more complexity to her already complex management. In my experience, everything sucked except for Antagonist, which stood out with its debuffs, allowing for significant damage mitigation or big damage setup with characters like Cultist. I should also mention that the descriptions of the subclasses are absolutely horrible. They give you the idea of what the changes are supposed to do, but tell you nothing about what it actually does, which in this game, more often than not, matters more than the idea of what something does. It's a repeated issue with the game. See Carcass for a glowing example, but specifically with these subclasses, you can't find what the stance bonuses are without looking it up, because the in-game token descriptions stay exactly the same regardless of what subclass subclass you use. I can only explain this by saying that they literally forgot to put the information in the game. Overall, maybe more on the bad side I think. For her squishiness, I would hope for more damage output, but she works best as a setup for other characters with their debuffs. I should mention that I don't feel like I fully explored her due to her complexity. The DLC costs $10. It's not bad, just annoying with how much grinding you have to do for something that you would have already had paid for. Now, as big of a fan I am of money, I gotta say, the developers at Red Hook Studios keep finding new ways to milk people out of cash, because they paywalled another fan favorite, the Abomination, for $10. A single character this time around for $10. I'm gonna be real with you. This one to me sucked especially, because A-Bomb in the first game used to be my favorite character. I had the OG squad back in the day. It was the first squad that I ever put together that worked perfectly in every situation. Sajid, the healer with the gambling addiction. Nick Gurr, his birthday was every day. Nelly the nerfed, who kept getting nerfed, and Boudica, who can be seen jumping from one tree to another on Thursdays. It was the first time I started doing well in the first game, and the team would have some close calls that ultimately grew my attachment to them. And while I always knew that their time would eventually end, I never would have expected how it would happen. Not by the hands of some bad luck with a low-level mob, not by the hand of a mega boss, but by the hands of the developers themselves.
Will I gamble now? No!
The Abomination as a class was engineered to be overpowered, because to bring him would not only stress out the team, but it would also cause religious characters to outright refuse joining the party with him back in the day. And while that didn't matter for most of the characters it locked out, it did lock out Vestal from the party, which in the first game was a must-have on every team. Red Hook Studios, in their infinite wisdom, woke up one day, ate Caesar salad, and then stabbed the class 23 times. When asked what their intent was with the nerf, they replied with the following:
Biga, our own tribal psychic, predicted that hermos would be problem in the future. So we nerf and nerf until he never problem again. Biga, African game designer. Biga, signing out.
They just randomly decided to walk back the entire philosophy of his design, nerfing him into being an awkward character and removing the religious limitation. So checking out a DLC where they re-released the character gave me a hint of nostalgia. I was actually excited to play as Nelly again, hopefully this time without the nerfs. Let's check him out.
What?
Only 2. They only gave him 2 abilities. That's all they gave him. That's all they gave my boy. I think I'm gonna cheat to get all abilities. I kind of don't want to just play with something that's completely deadweight on the party. Modal skill sets. That's one of his character descriptions. I'm pretty sure they're just going out of their way to be unintuitive at this point. I think I know what they're referring to, not from the word itself. I have no idea what this means, but I know what it means because I played A-Bomb in the first game. Also, they say here flexible damage, but in classic Red Hook fashion, they forgot to give him the damage. Alright, I'll see you when I'm done. Okay, by now I've done some good runs with all of the subclasses. The way the class works is that it has 2 skill sets, one for human mode and another for beast mode, though using beast mode comes at the cost of stressing out the character itself and the party members. The default subclass, Moribund and Unchained, were all pretty bad and awkward, very rarely shined, so much so that I'm just gonna skip over them. Fiend is where the beast mode more properly contributed in my opinion, though using beast mode can stress you out pretty quick, so you had to be very calculated with how you use it. The Abomination can also disrupt rank, but that doesn't mean much when nearly any enemy can use any ability from any position. It's easier to name the ones that can't than the ones that can. That shouldn't be the case. He's also pretty good at self-healing, easily the best self-healer in the entire game. 50% of his health back and -3 stress all in one click, but it can only be used twice in one fight. Overall, honestly, outside of the Fiend subclass, Beast Mode doesn't feel like Beast Mode. It's a character that only works with one specific subclass. They really missed the mark with this one. They learned from the community backlash of the first game. This time around, instead of waking up one day, eating Caesar salad, releasing the class, then nerfing it pretty hard, they instead woke up one day, ate Greek salad, nerfed the class into the ground, and then released it. There's also supposed to be a new mini area, but in 4 winning runs, which is about 12 hours of gameplay, I'm yet to see it. So if I paid for this DLC, I would have paid for content that I can't explore at will. The top review for the DLC at the time of recording begs the developers to go back to the gameplay loop of the first game. Now, about that spreadsheet, in classic hermos video fashion, the expected has unexpectedly happened. I wrote a script the size of a mountain and proceeded to throw away a script triple the size of that script. In other words, I won't be covering the spreadsheet here in this video. Instead, I've compiled my findings and thoughts for most things and summarized them in the spreadsheet itself, and you can find it in the description. I'm gonna be real with you. Halfway through editing the video, I realized I want to just move on. But the other part of me is like, hey, don't move on. There's still more to look into. Go on. You wanted to have a Socratic approach of critiquing things, didn't you? So go ahead, stare into the abyss and find at the bottom of that hellhole New Zealand staring back at you. I realize it's quite a flawed way of doing such a deep dive and that you're probably pointing and laughing at this degree of neglect. But honestly, considering the subject matter of today's video, I think spiritually, it's quite fitting. Just as Darkest Dungeon 2 doesn't have any dungeons, the spreadsheet section of the video doesn't go over the spreadsheet. I will, however, in here cover two things that I thought were too interesting to leave out, sort of as a final note. I read 3,000 reviews, but the raw number of all the critiques, except that one, seems to be on the lower end of quantity. Why is that the case? Look, the numbers are low, and if I'm being honest with you, initially I thought I was the crazy one. But after a sample test of 400 reviews, something more interesting became clear. In general, the overwhelming majority of Steam reviews aren't thorough about the game's mechanisms themselves, with the average number of details mentioned per review being just 1.8 details. That's 1 to 2 different details mentioned per review. That's not even to mention that most people just say the detail without explaining why or how things connect. Most people say that the game is good or bad, sometimes comparing it to something relevant, then move on. So for the more niche criticisms to hit the double digits in the first place, I think that spells a lot about how much people wanted to like this game in the first place. That or how hard the developers fucked up the game. Second, and the main thing that I wanted to explain a bit more, initially for these three, I was just gonna be mad and call everyone stupid, but along the way, I found something much more interesting. You see, whenever a game comes out calling itself a sequel but ends up being too different to be a sequel, there tends to be two opinions that stand out the most. The first one details that the game should be judged for what it is rather than what it is advertised as, and the other details that the game should be judged for what it thinks it is. You can essentially think of it as different degrees of objectivity, but frankly, both sides have a point. Marketing alone is an entire section of making games. There's many instances of a game doing well just because it was well known enough, and generally speaking, most people are willing to let go of the notion that this game should be similar to its predecessor so long as it is good enough on its own foot. But when a game calls itself a sequel in a subgenre that's all about encountering the unknown to then turn out to be nothing similar to its predecessor and have quite a number of mechanics that don't mesh well with itself, at what point is it the buyer's fault for not doing enough research on a game that not only does a terrible job at conveying information in general, but also expects you to know nothing in the first place? Whether you like to go in knowing nothing and figuring things out on your own, or whether you play the game with a guide video open in the back, regardless of that, I think everyone can agree that calling it a sequel was a mistake. Too much is different, which makes it a spin-off and should have been advertised that way. I also think everyone agrees that it's pretty funny that they forgot to put in a dungeon in a game called The Darkest Dungeon, and that's why I have the dungeon crawler tag reported on it on Steam, because not only does it not have the premise of dungeons executed for the most part, but even in its atmosphere and narrative, there isn't any claustrophobia whatsoever. If the game is attractive to you, don't feel bad. I myself can get into a shitty game every now and then that doesn't mesh well with itself. In fact, as of the editing of this video, I've downloaded malware and sunk more than 200 hours into it. I'm never gonna get those $25 back, but at the very least, I can still go back and play Darkest Dungeon 1. See what I did there? That's what I did there was called a joke. It's called a sarcasm. It's called a prank, you know, kind of like the prank that Red Hook pulled on us when they released this DLC in the first place. What a bunch of As of the time of recording, we're now approaching 4 months since Red Hook pushed an update onto the game that breaks the Color of Madness DLC. The loot window in the Endless Mode mission instantly closes the moment it opens up, which for a DLC that's all about the loot from the loot window completely defeats the purpose of the entire DLC. It seems their thirst of ruining my fun didn't end with the Abomination nerf, because now they're going back and ruining parts of the game around the same time I decided to start playing it again. So if you want to play Darkest Dungeon, but you already played it and the sequel isn't actually a sequel, what now? If you can believe it, I actually haven't been that big on modding Darkest Dungeon, but I'd be doing this video a disservice if I didn't mention a particular modded overhaul that has been a bad influence on my attention span recently. The Black Reliquary is available for free, provided you have the base game itself. I won't talk much about it because honestly, it's best you explore it for yourself. It's a pretty well made modded overhaul, and despite it saying that it features a full campaign on the store page, there isn't one yet. But there is 2 bosses in every region and 2 new classes to play with. It completely reimagines various sections of the game. There's honestly too much to mention. But for example, some abilities are removed and replaced with different ones altogether. Even the combat itself begins with a preparation round where accuracy is halved to encourage the use of buffs and debuffs. It has only 1 difficulty and it assumes you're good at the base game, so be ready for trouble. All in all, it's really good. The new regions are well made and unique, each featuring some sort of unique threat or mechanic, like the Treasury, which is my favorite region because I love money. It offers very little to no fights, but it does however offer many optional fights and, if done right, more difficult fights that reward you with highly valuable items that stack a lot. If you're confident and smart, this is a pretty good way to get rich. I should mention as well that since it's a Darkest Dungeon mod, technically speaking, it does also carry the curse of being a Darkest Dungeon mod, which of course means that there is a gazillion unexpected bananas and wahahas, if you know what I mean. I love the aesthetic and how the different regions work, and I also love how every guide of this overhaul is fucked with in some way. It's got its own flaws, but it's more of a sequel than Darkest Dungeon 2 ever was to the first game. You also get a couple trinkets that boost or slow down XP gain. I'm actually a huge fan of this edition. You know, this has all honestly been a healthy reminder to me that no matter how much you like a core idea or concept, that doesn't mean the developers can't make tragically foolish mistakes. Combining Pepsi and Coca-Cola, then going on to advertise it as water too. And while I can respect the willingness to experiment with the formula that they had, experimenting shouldn't come as blind as it did in here. When they're trying to pass a dating sim as a Lovecraftian turn-based roguelike game, I then have to question the replayable value of putting the meat and bone of the game way beyond the refund threshold. That's terrible, but it's honestly also terribly inspiring. And so it is, in the same spirit that I tell you now that future content is gonna make a lot less sense.
That's what I say. What a bunch of bitches. Honestly, what a bunch of bitches.
It's gonna be a lot less thorough, and it will contain more lies than the entirety of Darkest Dungeon 2's UI. As a starting point for this, on the Patreon, you can now pay less for the same benefits, mostly because the videos take too long to come out. And if you don't want to pay to join the Discord server, you can gamble your Twitch points for a chance at entering. And if you don't want to pay, and don't have the time, there's still a simple, reliable way for you to enter. Find the Easter egg, and when you do, follow the instructions. The deadline is 1 week after the public release of this video on YouTube. There's also a second channel featuring an extremely different type of content, one that is more serious oriented, if you can believe it.
Shut the fuck up!
Thank you. Oh my god, another murder. And finally, for an entire month after this video comes out, I'll be streaming twice every week. So that's more chances for more points for more gambling. If, despite this video, you have found Darkest Dungeon 2 to be something worthwhile to look into and you don't want to get scammed like me, then consider the immediate superpower that each of us embodies. The ability to introduce into the equation my own spirit animal, the concept of piracy.